Now, if you're someone who has any desire to building a strong upper body, then you should know that the overhead strict press is one of the most essential exercises you can be doing. But if you do this incorrectly, you are likely wasting your time and just asking for an injury in the shoulder. In today's video, I wanted to share with you some of the common mistakes that I see people make with this exercise, and most importantly, teach you how to perform this exercise with the right form. Let's get started. Welcome back to Talk to Mike, and I'm a physical therapist providing tips on how to build strength and longevity with your body. Today we're going to be talking about how to properly perform an overhead strict press. Now this is a great exercise to help build upper body strength in the deltoids and in the shoulder, which as a result will allow you to do a lot of things overhead with ease and strength. So we're gonna break this down in 3 parts. The first piece is going to be the setup, because I believe if you're set up incorrectly with this exercise, the execution and performing this is going to be very difficult. The second part we're gonna go over is the execution of a good rep. So some of the things that I want you to focus on and think about when you're performing the repetition. The last piece is going to go over the mistakes, the common mistakes that I often see people making that are wasting their time with this exercise. So let's get started with the first piece, which is the setup, because if you don't get this right, everything else kind of goes out the door. So as far as the execution, notice that as I'm demonstrating this video to you guys, I am facing outside the rig, away from you. But when you perform this at a gym or at your house or somewhere else, you're gonna actually be performing the squat rack. So you're gonna be taking the weight or the barbell off the squat rack, and you're gonna be facing the opposite direction. But for demonstration purposes, we're gonna use this direction so you can see what's going on with my elbows, my wrist, and my entire body. So setting up, notice that the barbell here, as far as the height of the barbell, is kind of at the level of my collarbone. Now, if you have the barbell too low, when you get set up, you're gonna have to kind of do a small dip and get underneath it. If you have it too high, you're gonna have to really reach on your tippy toes to get a hold of the bar. So you want the barbell to be set up at the height of at least around the collarbones. Now, as far as the grip, you wanna be about shoulder width apart. And the way I kind of find this is normally on a barbell, you'll see these small lines on the inside there. And I go about a thumb width apart there and then grab a hold of the barbell. Now, your hand grip is extremely important here, because if you're grabbing the bar and the placement of the barbell is on your fingers, immediately you can tell that it takes my wrist into excessive wrist extension, which means that when you go overhead and you start to have problems with your wrist going overhead, one good reason is that you might be placing the barbell too far up on your fingers. That requires a little bit more wrist extension, especially with the load on the barbell. It's going to force your wrist into a position that normally our wrists don't like being in. So vice versa, if you have the barbell set up on the palm, that's just dangerous, because when you're pressing it, it's more likely to kind of tip forward and fall off the palm of your hand. So I like to go at the middle of my palms with that hand grip there. And then once I'm at the middle of the palms, then I'm gonna wrap my fingers around the bar like in this position here. Now, as far as when you're standing, you want your feet to be about shoulder width apart so that you have a nice base of support, because if you're too narrow with your feet or if you're too wide, it's going to be very difficult when you start pushing that barbell overhead. Now, the key piece here with this setup is what's going on with the elbows and the direction the elbows are facing. So if I set up in a bad position where my elbows are facing down, I'm wasting a lot of energy just holding on to the barbell because it's not really resting anywhere. Versus if I take my elbows and I point them forward just like so, now it allows the barbell to kind of come back and rest on the front of my deltoids or my shoulder, and maybe a little on the collarbone, but mainly it's going to be on the upper chest and kind of resting. Now this is going to require a lot of shoulder mobility and a lot of wrist mobility, which is something that you definitely want to work on. But for the purpose of this video, we're gonna focus on really trying to get those elbows facing forward so that I can create a nice platform for the barbell to start with. So now that we've gone over how to properly set up for this exercise, now we can go over a couple tips on how to execute a good repetition. Now, the most important part with this exercise when you're getting ready to press the barbell overhead is ensuring that you have braced and tightened your core muscles in your abs and your glutes to make sure that you are properly engaged before you start moving your limbs. Now let me explain here. You don't want to just take the barbell out from the rack and immediately start pressing overhead. The one thing you want to really focus on is before you press, you want to focus on squeezing those glutes and tightening those abs. That's creating that tension prior to pressing the bar overhead. This is going to create that force, so when you start moving the barbell, your spine is set and ready to go. The second piece before we get ready is I kind of think about really trying to face my chest forward versus allowing it to cave down and round my upper back. When you start pressing, and if your upper spine is rounded, you're going to be limited when you start pressing that overhead just because of the mechanics and how our shoulders were built. So you want to make sure that not only are your elbows facing forward, but you kind of think about bringing your chest forward, almost like you're puffing your chest up, making sure that you're not arching your lower back. So your chest is facing forward, you're engaged through your abs and your glutes, and then you're gonna press that barbell straight overhead as high as you can. Focus on locking out those elbows at the top and then lowering back down. Also notice when I'm performing this exercise, the path of my elbows, they are actually facing forward versus allowing them to kind of flare out and go in this direction. Sometimes you'll see that people get in this really internally rotated at the shoulder, which they tend to have more pain with. So you want to make sure that those elbows stay facing forward as you go all the way at the top, and then as you lower it back down slowly. Okay, now moving on to the common mistakes that are just wasting your time with this exercise. The first mistake that I often correct people with is the head placement, because when they're pressing the barbell overhead, they completely forget about what's going on with their head. So the mistake that I often see people make is they kind of keep their neck in extension and they're just pressing looking up towards the ceiling the entire time. Okay, not only will that cause extreme strain on the neck, but it's not going to allow you to fully lock out and complete that repetition. So instead, you really want to focus on starting with a slight chin tuck when you're starting this exercise. And then as you press overhead, obviously you're going to have to move your face or your chin out of the way when you press, but most importantly, bring the chin back down as you lock out at the top. Then vice versa, as the barbell comes down, you really want to focus on going slow and moving your head out of the way and then coming back to that top position. So it's almost as if you're starting with a chin tuck, you move your face out of the way, bring it back forward, so it allows you to get in a good overhead position. And then as the barbell comes down, you're moving your head out of the way and then coming back with your head in a neutral position. The second mistake people are making with this exercise is arching of your lower back. And if you get the first piece right, which is the setup, this won't happen to you. So what you'll commonly see people do is as they're pressing overhead, they start to arch their lower back because they're disengaged in their glutes and their core. So they're not really paying attention to what's going on at the lower spine. So what happens is it tends to kind of shift their hips backward, their tummy sticks out, and they kind of lose control of their abdominals, which as a result can cause a lot of shear on the lower back, can feel really sensitive on that area. And you want to make sure that if you set up correctly by engaging your abs, engaging your glutes, that this mistake will not happen to you. Now, the last mistake that I often see people make, which is killing their gains with their upper body strength, is lowering the bar too fast. So often you'll see people start to press the bar and they do very good going slow because the barbell is very hard to press overhead. And then once they get to that top position, they just lower down slowly. And what you're doing is you're not really controlling the weight. You're not really allowing the deltoids and the chest to work efficiently. When you're at the top and you're lowering down slowly, you're actually still working on that eccentric strength. You're working on the muscle stretching. You're working on the muscle getting strong. And you have to really focus on the entire movement and not just the first piece of the movement. So when you're performing this exercise, not only do you want to control the movement all the way up at the top, but you also want to really maximize the benefits of the exercise by controlling the movement all the way till the barbell reaches down back to your collarbone. This will ensure that as you're working on each repetition, you can focus on your breathing, you can focus on proper form, and most importantly, you can focus on building strength in the right areas. Now that you know the common mistakes that people make with this exercise, you can be assured that you will have proper technique and form with this exercise and now be able to focus on building upper body strength the right way. Now, if you have issues with going overhead or focusing on your mobility because of this exercise, make sure to check out the videos that I've made in the past that go over shoulder mobility here. In the meantime, if you enjoyed this video, please give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and if there's any other topics that you guys want to hear about, please list them in the comments box below. I'll see you in the next one.